Hey, welcome to another episode of Some Random Thoughts. I'm your host, Ryan Mulkowski, and on today's program, I have with me a very special guest and a good friend. Her name is Danielle Southwick. She's a grief recovery specialist and also has huge interest in trauma-informed care and resiliency. And Danielle, for the audience, just introduce yourself and kind of tell us where we can find you on social media and kind of what you've been up to, what you've been working on, and anything else you want to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, guys. So I'm Danielle Southwick, and it's pretty easy. You can find me at daniellesouthwick.com or Southwick Grief Recovery on Instagram. So those are the two main platforms that I'm on currently. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on, Ryan.
Thank you so much for being on, Danielle. And we'll have all of her info in the notes section so you can look her up easily. So, what Danielle's going to help me with on this episode is we are doing a revisit episode. So, season one, you saw that I covered a variety of different topics. Danielle is going to do the revisit with me on the trauma and resilience episode that I did in season one. And so, that's what you'll be listening to. And the reason why I invited Danielle on is that she has a wealth of knowledge about trauma and about resiliency. And as a grief recovery method specialist, which I also am, I think grief and trauma are kind of all intertwined. And I think that's why I kind of initially wanted to talk about trauma and resilience. But I also wanted to talk about it because I think we all, in one way or another, experience varying degrees of trauma. And what's important is when we are faced with trauma, how do we move forward in that, and what are kind of the resiliency points? How can we be resilient in a world that provides difficulty, and then at times, unfortunately, we deal with traumatic situations, whether it's professionally or personally. And so Danielle's got a wealth of information to share, and so I can't wait to hear her thoughts. But let's dive in, Danielle. So that's my first question to you is, I know you listened to the episode that I did in
Right.
season one in preparation for this. So tell me, what were your general thoughts about the episode? What did you like? What did you maybe have some disagreements about or some different perspectives on? And we'll just jump in from there.
Yeah, I liked this episode a lot, and I had to listen to it twice because I really wanted to dive in and dissect it a little bit and understand. I had to slow it down. So usually when I listen to a podcast, I have it at like 1.5. I
Yeah.
actually had to slow you down a little bit because you were just like fire, 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 which is awesome.
I got to
It's
work on that, slowing down my pace a little
awesome.
bit. I've been told that all my life, so no
Yeah.
offense here. Yes, I do need to slow down.
That's what the feature's for. So I slow it
It's the former
down.
preacher in me, for sure, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So, but it was good. It was so good. And it's something that I'm so passionate about and like interested in learning more. And it really sparked some thinking for me of like, well, what is this? Like resiliency. One of the things that I wish you had done on the front end was
Okay.
define the terms, but
Okay. Yep.
that's okay,
Yeah.
right? I'm coming at it with like a lot of background in it, and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
but I wanted that refresher. So
Why
do you
don't you
have
do
one?
that for us? Why don't you do that as someone
Oh
who's
my
intimately
gosh,
involved?
you're gonna throw it right back
I
at
I
me.
am. Well, no, because I think that's a really good criticism is that I think sometimes I forget to define the terms, just having a general assumption that, well, everyone knows what trauma means and everyone knows what
Right.
resiliency means, but you're right. I can't assume that everyone has the same understanding of those things. So,
Right. And I
yeah.
think there's just such a varied like what does that actually mean? So I like to be on like that like upfront clear what are we talking about? And so
Yeah.
like trauma is the emotional response to some terrible event, right? In
Okay.
its very simplicity form,
Hmm.
an emotional response. And resiliency is the capacity to quickly recover from difficulty. So
Okay.
it's a bounce back, right? And what was interesting to me is what are you bouncing back to, right?
Ooh.
And really right, and it was just like phenomenal when I was listening to what you were talking about. One of the things that really stuck out to me, and I'm like looking at my computer because I took notes. I mean,
You're okay. Yep.
this is a study. This is a study. um, but one of the things you had said was resiliency is about rebuilding, not regaining.
Mm,
And I was like, oh, Ryan, never thought about it like that. Because, when something traumatic happens, there is a loss that occurs in that, right?
hmm.
And so you're not trying to regain that thing again. You can't. That thing is now changed, it's
Mm,
different than it was, right? But you are rebuilding. And that was so empowering to me and so
mm,
hopeful. And it made me think about that. I was like, okay, so what is resiliency? If it's being able to bounce back, and what are you bouncing back to? then you really have to make sure that your foundation that you're bouncing back to is strong, right? And that comes
Yeah.
down to identity, right? So for me, it was like, I I'm interested in this because for a long time in my career, I put my hope in that, and
Mm,
that only got me so far, right? And
mm,
then I would put my hope in friends or family or other things like that, and that was like just, it wasn't deep enough, right? It
yeah.
wasn't like who, like why I am, right? It was what I did and how I did it, but not why I did something. So that was just something that sparked interest in me to dig deeper, and that's something I'm going to start researching on a little bit more of, like why.
Wow, that's no, that's really powerful to kind of hear from you because I think you're right. It's a lot we pour a lot of our energy, our inner self into various different things. But if we're putting ourselves in various different things that are either so temporary and uncertain that they just fluctuate so much that we don't get stability and then we don't get grounding, so we don't feel safe and
Mm-hmm.
secure, or if we're putting ourselves in things that ultimately will lack a foundation of meaning and purpose,
Right.
then it's going there, then unfortunately it's kind of inevitable to me that we're going to have some trauma responses from that, because anytime a change happens, especially if it's a change that's like more detrimental to our inner self, then we're going to be left with this traumatic response, this emotional response, as you say.
Yeah.
And then we're going to be like, okay, well, how do I bounce back from that? How do I move forward and progress from that?
Yeah. No, and I thought about it in terms of like finances. So like thinking about
Okay.
bouncing back from something, right? Like what is the point of an emergency fund? An
Mm,
emergency fund is to help the bounce back happen smoothly, right? But if you're not putting into the emergency fund, then when your car breaks down, it's going to be traumatic to like the next level, right? Because you're like, oh my God, how am I going to get
yep.
to work? Like, how am I going to get food? How am I going to take care of my
Yep.
family? It's just like super intense all at once. Whereas if you just like, I love this phrase someone taught me, like pay now or pay later, but at some point you have to pay. And
Oh,
it's like
yeah.
this idea of like, just do the work now because it's going to help your future self, right? And so when you think about like trauma and traumatic things happening, the way that you can start to build resilience is by doing those things every day, so that when a big event happens, it's not as intense because you have that emotional emergency fund built up, right? And so it's not draining
Yeah.
resources, because you're giving out of excess and you're not giving out of lack.
Wow, that's really good. So resilience training is something we should all invest in, and it's something that we should invest in probably continually because, like you said, it's not something that you're going to want to start working on when a traumatic event
Right,
happens. It's
right,
something you want to do now so that
right.
when a traumatic event does happen, you have the tools and the
Right.
resources
You,
in
you,
order
you
to
don't you,
respond to
you
it.
don't take a CPR course when you're choking, right? You take it so that
Right.
when you
That's a
start
good point.
choking, you actually have it to use. I don't know where I came up with that. I just thought of
It's
that. So,
good, right.
right.
No, it's a
So you
good
know what I mean? Like
analogy.
you
Yeah,
need to know
you don't
how
want
you're
the
doing it.
thing at the moment, you need to be prepared for it. And you
Right.
know, Danielle and I both do grief work. And so one of the things with clients is it seems like grief and trauma are very intertwined. Have you noticed
Mm-hmm.
that in your experience professionally and personally with your own grieving
Mm-hmm.
process or with working with clients? And how do you really navigate that those complexities with clients?
Yeah, interesting. Yes, absolutely. I first experienced that in my own life where
Okay.
trauma happens and then there's something unresolved emotionally around that trauma, which then is grief, right? There's a
Yeah.
loss that occurs that is not addressed. And the thing about grief is, and you know this, but the thing about grief is that it's accumulative, right? And it's
Mm,
cumulative negatively. So if you have an event that occurs and you don't deal with it, that just kind of adds on to the next event and to the next event and to the next event. You have to get and work through and process those emotions. Otherwise, you're just stuck in them. They're
yeah.
actually physically weighing you down emotionally because you're expending energy to either suppress them or to not feel them, right? That was a
Mm-hmm.
big part of my
Mm-hmm.
story, and what is my story of like, this idea of don't feel bad can easily become don't feel.
Oh,
And so
yep.
it's a subtle difference, but it's
Mm-hmm.
dangerous
Mm-hmm.
because then you're stopping the flow of your emotions, right? And
Yeah.
emotions are just like, it's like a river. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like they
Mm-hmm.
come, they go, you experience it, and the next one's coming down.
Mm.
Uh, but it can feel like a waterfall, right? Trauma is like, it's happening all at once. It's overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I guess in my work with my clients, like I tend to work with people who have experienced trauma in their life but haven't dealt with it for a long time, which I
Okay.
guess makes sense because that was my story and how I, processed some very traumatic things, very
Mm-hmm.
young things at an early age,
Mm-hmm.
where I never had the ability to. I never was taught how to do it, but once
Mm.
I learned it, it was like it changed. Like I changed it. I had to do the work for that. How that ties with resiliency. So this
Yeah.
is something else that I wanted to talk about. I was excited to talk about it because
Go ahead.
when I so when I connected, like, oh, I do resiliency work. That's what I do. Like, I offer all these different courses in grief recovery
Mm-hmm.
and adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse and
Mm.
boundaries. Like,
Yeah.
what's the common thread here? Like, I was trying to figure it out. I'm like, it's resiliency. And when I was first going to therapy for myself and like trying to dig through and process some deep emotions and hurts and wounds, my all my therapists would say, "Wow, you're so resilient. You're so resilient. Wow, that's a lot. Like that's a lot for one person." And I was like angry. I was angry that they would tell me this. I was mad because it was frustrating to me. I didn't see it as a superpower. And for
Mm.
me, looking at it from the other side of lots of work, lots of tough, hard work that I had to do, I look at that now as resiliency is my superpower. I can bounce back. This does not impact me emotionally because I'm not allowing it to drain me anymore. I'm acknowledging it in life's complexities, but I'm able to hold both this is bad and this is good. Like hold complexity for those things. And you have to build that. It doesn't just start where you're like, "Oh, let me learn about that. Cool, I learned it. Moving on to the next thing." It's practiced.
Wow. I mean, that's something I wanted to ask you too, because I see this huge tension with people who have experienced traumatic events, whether it's on social media. I read a lot of people's stories, and a lot of people feel open to share their story. And I think it makes us better humans to hear other people's stories and to just listen to them and sit with them. And I see some pushback, and then I see some ownership from
Mm-hmm.
both people, from both parties. So for example, like with resiliency, like some people really love that word and really
Mm-hmm.
embrace it and own it because they see it as, I've done the work, I've done the hard work, the emotionally draining work, but the emotionally empowering work of trying to be resilient and becoming more resilient, so that way when future things happen to me, they don't sink me back into past behaviors, but I
Mm-hmm.
can stand more firm. And then I see other people who are just like, I'm always tired and exhausted of being told I'm resilient
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want to be resilient because I shouldn't have
Yeah.
to be resilient because these things shouldn't have happened to me. And so I see a lot of people
Right.
kind of like push back and kind of get offended when, if like for example, if I told you like, man, Danielle, man, you just are so resilient, and
Uh-huh.
after everything you've gone through, have you seen those kind of responses too, of some people kind of really being like, they're not comfortable with constantly being told they're resilient, and then some people that are like, yeah, damn right, I'm resilient. I've been
Yeah.
doing this.
I've seen both.
Okay.
I've witnessed both. I was both. You
Okay.
know, it just it, I think when on the far end of it, right, when you're just like when your emotions are like there to tell you something. They're
Mm,
information, they're data. And so when you get angry about something, that's telling you something like, hmm, be curious about it. Like why am I angry, right? When people tell me I'm resilient, it usually means that there's something unresolved in the story, right? Something unresolved in the wound that is bringing that up for the person. But then you can also go too far on the other side where you're just like cocky and like, yeah, hell yeah,
mm,
I went through that. And like telling your story is only half of the equation.
okay.
There has to be an action of healing the wound also,
Okay.
because you can tell your story over and over and over again, like trauma dumping, right? I don't know if you've
Mm-hmm.
heard that term. Like you're just like oh, this is what happened to me, and this is what happened to me, and you're just trying to get someone to hear you and really witness you, which is an important part of it.
Yeah.
But if you never take the action steps to heal from it, which looks different for everybody because everyone's trauma is unique, right? Everyone
Mm.
is unique.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it looked like a lot of one-to-one therapy and
Okay.
bodies and trauma group and learning parts work, and then doing GR, grief recovery for myself. That's how
Okay.
I got introduced to it, and then taking some other courses. And really, it was a long and slow road. And feeling, I had to learn what feelings were. So I think there's extremes on both ends,
Okay.
but if you can hold the complexity of, yes, this happened and I can do something about it, super empowering. Like, and
Yeah.
hope.
I was going to ask you, I think one of the common things that I witness with clients is just a sense of disempowerment and a
Mm-hmm.
loss of control. It seems like a lot of the common threads or foundational threads that I feel, whether it's grief, trauma, anxiety, I feel like a lot of these common threads that I see with a lot of like mental health conditions or just normal, just human condition is a loss of
Life is
control.
hard.
Yeah,
Life is
exactly.
hard.
So just a loss of
Take trauma
control.
out of it. Like, life is difficult. Actually, that's
Yeah,
something you talked about, like collective loss, right? Collective things
correct.
we
Right.
just experienced. And how do we, trying to look forward to my notes here, how do we come back from that collectively too? And what does it take to be collectively resilient? um, Man, I wish I was taught that at a younger age. I
Yeah, me
wish I
too.
was taught how to take care of myself and meet
Hmm.
my basic needs, and form a community and really have deep rooted connections to that. And I'm not just saying like social media community. I'm talking about like people who know me and people who I know.
Ooh,
Living life together.
that's so important. And yet there's so much vulnerability involved in that. And I think trauma, one of the things I've noticed, whether it's my own trauma or other people's trauma and they've shared,
Mhm.
is it seems like the more traumatic experiences you have, the less vulnerable you are.
Well,
Because
I
if
think
you've
you're
been, well,
just
because if you've been
guarded.
hurt, right, you put
Yeah.
up a wall and you don't want to get hurt again. But
Right.
then if you don't let people in, then you run the risk of not being able to form those deep relationships. So how do you
Mhm.
navigate all those complexities?
I think I looked at it like that for a very long time.
Okay.
And I had to shift my thinking that community, not all community, but certain community is safe,
Okay.
right? And what does that look like? Because you can't do life alone. We're not meant to do life alone. We're not lone wolves. We're part of a pack, which is,
Mm,
you know what I mean? Like, and it's tough. It's part of survival to do life together.
mm-hmm. Yep.
um, and so if you can kind of change your mindset and start to think of like, even if it's one simple step, like to start to learn to rebuild trust. And I think it starts with trusting yourself, because usually with trauma you get this mixed signal that I should have known better, or why didn't
Mm,
I, why did this happen to me? Like, I there's something wrong with me. Like, these things, these belief systems that we talk to ourselves. um, and so the first person you need to learn how to trust is yourself.
wow.
You need to learn to trust your instincts, and then let that inform you to the next step and the next step. And I mean, it took a long time before I opened up and trusted. It took a long time, even for me and my husband, like, not my now husband, but we had known each other. We were friends for a long time, and I was guarded. I was guarded because I
Mm,
didn't want to get hurt. And
yeah.
that's normal, and that's okay. Like,
Okay.
not judging that, not judging your process. Like,
Okay. So it is normal and it is okay.
yeah.
But it's so what, so like you said, for your journey, some of the work you did to move from that space into a space where you could learn to trust yourself and then be able to trust certain people, certain communities that were proven to you that were safe and that
Mm-hmm.
you could be safe in. Your process was like one-on-one therapy and gaining tools and other techniques. So I wanted to kind of go to the article a little bit. And so let
Sure.
me just reference for the audience specifically, because I have it pulled up here. I'm going to reference the article and I'll also put it in the liner notes as well. So if people want to look at this article later, they can. The article is called Resilience after trauma from surviving to thriving. The authors of the article were Nicole Nugent, Jennifer Sumner, and Nanda Amstadter. And then they referenced a bunch of other people. They referenced a I didn't even notice this for some reason. Did not notice this until like 5 minutes before we were
I
meeting.
know what you're about to say.
Okay, they referenced a Dr. Southwick.
Not me, but I love it.
I mean, I mean, we could have played it off like I actually have on the program, Dr. Southwick. No, that's not honest. But are you at all related to a Dr. Southwick that's
I'm sure
referenced
I'm
in this
related
article?
to a Dr. Southwick somewhere in life, but not this
Right.
Dr.
I
Southwick.
mean, it would be really cool if you were, because then I'd be like, okay, I'm going to talk to Danielle, and then she's going to get me in touch with this Dr. Southwick.
Exactly.
But
I'll look into it, but no, I saw that too, and I was like, yeah,
okay.
go
Wah,
Southwick.
wah, wah, disappointment. Okay. But it's okay. It's okay. But anyway, we'll have the reference to the article because we are going to talk about the article a good bit. And so I want the audience to make sure if they want to do their own research, they
Yeah,
can.
definitely read this one. It was
It's
good.
it's really good because I mean, obviously it's just a good academic scholarly article. They have a ton of reference points and a ton of data. But on top of that, they were able to write this section that was really helpful for me about just listing out these psychosocial factors. And I really wanted to kind of talk about the psychosocial factors.
Okay.
Now, for the audience, real quick, if you want to hear just my thoughts, you can go to it's in the episode in season 1. I do talk about these psychosocial factors, but I want to get Danielle's views. And as someone who is way more intimately involved in trauma and resilience work than I am, I want to hear what her thoughts are about these psychosocial factors and if she believes that they are helpful in promoting resilience. And so the authors identified through their research 6 psychosocial factors that promote resilience in individuals. And I'm going to list them real quick and then we'll go one by one. Okay. So the
Mhm.
first one was optimism. The second one was cognitive flexibility. The third one was active coping skills. The fourth one is maintaining a supportive social network. The fifth one is attending to one's own physical well being. And the sixth one is embracing a personal moral compass. So, Danielle, let's break these down one by one, get your thoughts. So, the first one is optimism. How do you think, well, I'm not going to say how. First of all, do you think optimism is an important psychosocial factor? And if you do, how does it help in promoting resilience?
In regards to trauma and recovering from trauma.
Correct. I think all of these
Yeah.
are in reference to trauma and recovery from trauma, correct?
Yeah, optimism is important and it's really tough when you're in the midst of it. It
Mm.
is so it is so difficult to steal a phrase to read the label from inside the bottle.
Ooh,
It's
okay.
so difficult um, to to feel like this is ever going to end when you're in the midst of the storm,
Okay.
and especially when you don't have the tools to be in the storm, right? If you haven't been taught those things and prepared to be in a storm, right? When you're in a a nice boat that is structured and safe, and yeah, let's go waves and wind, but if you're in, like, I felt like I was in like a little dinghy, and I was just like, well,
Mm,
I don't know what to do. Like, I'm just gonna keep scooping water out, and hopefully I make it. So optimism, I think that ties right back to hope, right? If you don't
mm-hmm.
have hope that it's
Yep.
going to get better,
Yep.
and I mean, it can be the smallest thing that brings you hope. I remember back in very long time ago, I won't tell you my age, but I was like early 20s. And it was in the midst of when I was first diagnosed with complex PTSD. It was the
Mm,
first point in my life where a lot of these things were coming up. I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't eating well. I wasn't taking care of myself well. Like, I wasn't sleeping. Like, there's just nightmares and all the horrible stuff that
mm,
comes with that, right? And I remember not feeling hopeful, and I'm not understanding, like, why is this happening? Like, why is this? Why? Like, asking that great question, why? Um, Instead of what can I do about it,
right.
right? I get stuck in that why. And so I remember at the worst point of that year, I was sitting in my car, windows rolled down with a train going by, trying to decide whether I was going to live or die,
Wow.
right? And
Yeah.
what? I was looking for hope. I was looking for optimism. And I remember making a mental list in my mind and, like, just thinking about, like, what is keeping me here. And at the time, my sister was pregnant with her first child, And that's all I needed. I just needed that one thing. And
Mm.
it was like, how could I deprive him of his future aunt? Because when I'm well, like I'm pretty cool, like but in
Damn
the
right.
moment I was like, in the moment it was like horrible situation. And so that's what kept me around. I've never told her that story. I will, and I hope to eventually. I hope to eventually tell him that story. Like that really impacted me. But optimism is so important to keep moving to the next step. And so what is it that you put your hope in? Right? Do you put your hope in modern medicine? Do you put your hope in faith? Do you put your hope in whatever your ability to be strong, right?
Mm.
In grief recovery, we talk about be strong or be
Yeah,
human.
right.
You can only be one, so choose one.
Right.
I tried to white knuckle that
Mm.
stress for a long time, and it didn't work. It just kept me getting worse and worse and worse. So
Yeah.
I think you have to start with your why. Why am I here? Why? What is the purpose? What is anchoring me? Right? When you drop an anchor down, your boat might go left or right just a little bit, right? But it's going to stay in that place. So it can't pull you off course. And so, yeah, I would say that optimism is important. It's just like really hard to discover that sometimes. And sometimes you need others in your life, right? That community to help you define what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good point too that I think I want to highlight and emphasize that in no way did I decipher from reading the study that these were in order or that they were or that they're stages or anything like that. I think
Mhm.
they were just listing them.
Mhm.
So honestly, I think you're right. All of these factors probably have some varying levels of like significance and then also varying levels of when you can even achieve that particular psychosocial factor. Because you're
Sure.
right, some of those psychosocial factors you probably can't achieve right away. Probably takes years of
Mhm.
intensive work and seeking support and help. So that's a really
Mhm.
good point. So I appreciate you mentioning that. And I noticed that in my grief recovery work too. When someone's like right at the beginning of their grieving process, you can't be just
Mhm.
throwing out this like toxic positivity and
Yeah, yeah,
hope
yeah.
for
Oh,
people.
everything's gonna be great.
Yeah, because you're right. They're in this
No,
like
it's
storm of
gonna
grief.
suck.
Exactly. They're in this like storm of suck and grief and overwhelm and sadness.
Yeah,
And you can't just be throwing out those things to them in the
yeah.
middle of that. You gotta bear witness and support and help them to process and work through those things. And then you're right. I think the optimism comes later whenever they can
Mhm.
start seeing
Mhm.
that light of hope.
When they
And that
start
right.
seeing the results of the work.
Yeah.
I think that for me was a big one. Like I
Okay.
started like even a small thing. It was small. I'm like, I just want this, like X amount. Okay, that's a goal. Great. Small obtainable goals like brought that hope to
Mm.
me. But yeah, when I work with clients, I tell them like this is tough work. Like this is
Yep.
going to be tough. You're not alone. I'm walking there with you. Like and I've been there before, so many times I've done like 33 different relationships through the work, and I'm just like, the
Mm.
work works. Like, why wouldn't I want to keep clearing space for myself?
Correct.
um, but it's difficult, and I tell them like usually around week X, you're gonna want to quit. You're gonna want to walk away, and when that happens, you give me a call, and we'll keep pushing forward. Because on the other side of it, there's freedom, right? You don't have to carry this anymore, and like to see that happen with a client, like I just get goosebumps because it's awesome. Because I'm like, told you, like, yeah, let's keep
It
doing it.
really is amazing when you can do that kind of work, and I've seen that kind of those similar results, and it blows
I
my
love
mind.
that.
It blew my mind when it worked on myself, and then it
Yeah.
blew my mind even more when I was starting to do this work with others, and then it's
Mhm,
working for them, and I'm just like,
mhm,
and it never gets old. Whenever and no matter how many clients you'll do,
mhm,
it just that kind of reward of just seeing people really break through
mhm,
and gain their capacity for happiness and a sense of
mhm.
of hope moving forward is just it for me, and I know probably for you too. It's just there's very few things that can just really make you feel good about
Yeah.
being a human and that you're just helping other humans
And
in their time of need.
that's community.
Yeah.
Right, when you work with a coach one to one, that's community. Even
Mhm.
if all your community is one other person, you can build upon that, you can expand upon that, and you should. It shouldn't just be one person always, right? But
Right.
build that out. But you have to start somewhere.
Absolutely. The second thing I want to talk about is cognitive flexibility. This seems like the most heady of all of them, probably the most
Yeah,
intellectual of all of them. The
sure.
only so my definition, and Danielle can expound if she has a different one or whatever. So my definition of cognitive flexibility is adaptability. It's
Mm,
how well can you train your mind to be able to
hmm
handle intense, difficult
hmm
situations,
hmm
specifically traumatic situations or grief-related situations. Is how well is your mind able to adapt? How well is your mind able to recall
hmm
tools and processes and things like
hmm
that? You please expound for us kind of what is your understanding of cognitive flexibility and its importance in relation to trauma.
Yeah, it's really about reframing.
Oh,
In,
good.
in
That's
in
good.
its simplest form, right? It's saying, instead of I have to do this, I get to do this,
Mm,
right? Oh, I have to deal with all of this like stuff that happened to me. And blah, blah. No, I get to, so that I don't pass it down to the
mm.
next generation, right?
So
I
you
get
believe in
to
that
hold it.
generational trauma thing? Because I've seen some debates about generational trauma too. So tell me
I
about that.
It's motivating to me. I mean, like, I don't want to stay stuck, right, in who I am. I want to grow and evolve and be the best version of myself. And that sounds cheesy, but like, I do. I'm motivated by that. And I
Right.
don't want to pass down like coping mechanisms that are unhealthy. Like, it's not just
Mm,
generational wounds, it's like the things that you were taught, myths and beliefs
right.
about yourself, and
Yeah.
how you view the world and authority and finances and all these things, right? That maybe are a little off course, that you need some course correction to, so that you can teach your next generation something healthier, right? And that influences your friends, your family, anyone. When you start to do the work yourself, it influences other people, whether they're doing work or not, which is great. I've seen that happen over and over again. They're like, oh, this is different. I'm like, yeah, well, you don't see the behind the scenes where I'm spending lots of money and lots of time and lots of energy and lots of tears sometimes
Mm.
to heal that, so that I don't have to be defined by it anymore.
Yeah, that's powerful. I just enjoyed listening just to that. I was just trying to soak that
Yeah.
in.
Reframing. Yeah, because you
Reframing.
can
So
see it.
so cognitive flexibility is reframing. That's really
Yeah.
what you're thinking of
Yeah.
and have expounded on. Yeah. No, I think that reframing work, oh my God, when I was first trying to learn reframing, it was like impossible for my brain somehow to just even cope with that. Because I think like my whole life I thought I had to be stuck and tormented with the the tape. I mean, I guess
Mm,
aging me a little bit, the cassette tape of the narratives that kept on playing in my head. And I thought that
mm,
those narratives were, first of all, true, and second of all, permanent. And then when
mm,
I was given the freedom and the capacity to understand that they're not necessarily true and they don't have to be permanent, and that I can
mm-hmm,
do the work to change the narrative, oh my God, I
mm-hmm.
mean, that was like life changing for me. So
Well,
the whole reframing
yeah.
aspect is powerful.
I don't say reframing like, oh, it's just reframing. Okay, cool, got it. Thanks, Danielle. Bye. No, it's like your brain wants to take the path of least resistance,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you've been thinking about one thing for a long time, many years, you can't just say, it's unrealistic to say, oh, I'm going to fix this in 6 months. Or I'm going to fix
Right.
this in 1 year.
Yep.
It's going to take a lot of time to chip away at that and build a new pathway of
Mm-hmm.
thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But when you do that, okay, it becomes easier and easier and easier, which kind of leads me into active coping skills, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Let's do number three. So active coping skills.
Yeah, because such a practical one, but it's something that you can practice, just like your belief systems. What are you thinking? What are
Hmm.
you doing?
Oh,
And
good. Good.
yeah, right. And so it's repetitive. And when you do things that are repetitive, your brain starts to like, oh, I like this because I don't have to think, I don't have to put so much energy towards it anymore. I know what I'm doing. And so for me, I recently started working with this nutritionist, and it's been like 12 or 13 weeks. But at first, it was really difficult because I'm changing something, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
changing a behavior
Mm-hmm.
from something that was like quick, easy, just fine. I don't have to think about it, to intentionality.
Mm.
And really that is like looking at your coping skills, you have to be intentional about it. Like, what works for me might not work for you. I play the piano sometimes, I color, I have a
Mm-hmm.
couple different skill sets, and like, but that might be different for someone else, and that's okay. But this is more of I think having the most fun with, is because you get to be curious and try new things and
Yes. Yep.
see maybe this will work. I've tried meditation. I don't know. I guess sometimes it's cool.
See, my primary coping skills are mindfulness and meditation and journaling. And I
Mhm.
hear so many people that are like, I have no interest in writing whatsoever, Ryan. So you're gonna have to give me another coping skill.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
what I've tried to do in my own professional work is I'm really big about learning styles.
Mhm.
And so I've, had to study for myself. I had to like educate myself on like what are all the major learning styles that exist, and then trying to get to know my client well enough
Mm,
to understand his or her or their learning style, and then try to like match up coping skills I think that would work best with that
yeah,
learning style.
yeah.
And once I was able to do that with clients, and this was probably like halfway throughout my professional work in doing this, oh my goodness, it was so much easier for me to work with my clients, because then they're like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, I could totally do that, instead of trying to give them what I thought would work best for them.
Right,
And then they'd
right,
either like have no desire, and so they didn't do it, so they're stuck, or
right.
they were just dismissive altogether. And that was really important for me to go, look, you're helping people discover their stuff. You're not trying to
Mhm.
thrust
Right.
your stuff upon them, and that was important for me to learn.
I think it's important too because you're taking inventory of what you need and then you're meeting the need.
Mm,
And I don't I think we are in such a fast pace, fast moving, quick, go, go, do. It's like slow down. Just slow down. It's okay.
hmm
Like ask yourself, what do I need right now? I had to practice that. I wasn't in tune with that, with what I needed. And sometimes it's as simple as I need a drink of water.
yep.
Okay. Let me go take one. Like let me grab some water and drink it, right? I need whatever. Um, but yeah, I think just like cognitive flexibility, your coping skills are something that's practiced,
hmm
and it's something that is reformatted over time. Like
Yeah, right.
it's just ongoing care.
Absolutely. Number four was maintaining a supportive social network. And you've talked a little bit, and you talked about this already. You've touched on this. You call
Mm-hmm,
it community. Most
mm-hmm,
people would probably refer to it as community. So,
mm-hmm.
why is community important, and how do you maintain or establish or improve upon a supportive social network?
Yeah, you can do this in so many ways. I'm from upstate New York, and I moved to Los Angeles for my profession. I'm back in upstate New York now, but when I moved to
hmm
California, I didn't know anybody,
Mm,
no one. I just was like, I have a dream and hope and
hmm
a goal, and I'm gonna crush it, and it's gonna
Yep.
be great. And so I just started to look up like, what do I like to do, and where are those people, right?
Mm,
I enjoyed helping others, of course, but like I was in media and tech and TV. So I would start to join like little meetup groups
hmm
and trying to find that. And I eventually stumbled into like a great community of friends, but like I didn't know anybody. So you don't have to like know a lot of people in order to start finding a community. Recently, I've been using Clubhouse, which is
Yeah.
an awesome tool and a resource to connect with people and like mindedness.
hmm
Um, so yeah, I mean, community again, like you can't do life alone. You're not meant to. It's not safe either. Think about it like, you know, we used to be hunter gatherers protecting the tribe.
Right.
We're tribal people.
hmm
We're community driven people,
hmm
and there's safety in that. And so when you're this lone wolf and you're out there doing your own thing and you're, I don't need anybody, which I've had that attitude before. Okay, so I'm talking to myself here.
Yeah.
Like
Right. Me too. Me too.
yeah, it's like you can only get so far. You can because you only have your best thinking. You only have your resources. You only have your knowledge base.
Mm,
So really, it's not about using other people, but it is about it's this term interdependence, right? There's independence, there's
dependence.
dependence, and
Yep.
interdependence. So it's like you are yourself and who you are as a unique individual, and your good days, your bad days, everything in between. But you also need other people to complement that.
Yeah, the two things I think of are, collaboration and curiosity. right?
Mhm.
A good interdependence. And I totally agree with you that, I think independence and dependence are probably like on the ends, and interdependence is in the middle, and there's a spectrum there.
Mhm.
But yeah, when I think of interdependence, I think of, collaboration and curiosity. Like, how do you collaborate best with other humans, right?
Mhm.
So that, and then how are you curious and trying to build a better community, and how much do you give and how much are you willing to receive? Because I,
Mhm.
in my heart, I think for the longest time people always noticed this about them, whether it was therapists or supervisors or just advisors, whether they were spiritual or emotional advice, just like, like life coaches and pastors and stuff from my past. So one of the common threads I kept on coming into about myself that was hard for me to accept was, Ryan, you're the type that you give so much and you don't allow people to give back to you.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
I was like, dang, like that's hard to hear, but it's so true that for some reason I felt like I wasn't allowed to receive, or
Mm.
that I would be selfish, or that it meant that I was
Mm.
weak to receive
Mm.
help and to want community and to want those things. And that's
Mm.
not true at all. So when I broke that narrative that it doesn't mean I'm weak, it doesn't mean that I'm selfish, it doesn't mean that I'm these things, it means that I'm worthy of these things. It means I'm courageous and vulnerable because
Mhm.
I'm allowing myself to open up myself to other
Mhm.
people. And so, yeah, no, I think interdependence is a huge important part of the psychosocial process for sure.
You said curiosity and what else?
A collaboration.
Collaboration. Here's the interesting point, and maybe I'm going off on a bunny trail here, but reel me back if I do.
Okay.
When you're dealing with trauma, like we were talking about, the spectrum, right?
Mhm.
Independence, dependence,
Mhm.
and interdependence,
Mhm.
right? I think of it in the terms of trauma, of like you can get so wrapped up in your trauma that you are like completely detached from it, you're independent from it, or you can get on the other end so attached to your trauma that you're completely dependent on that storyline
Yeah.
because it defines who you are. And interdependence with trauma is like integration, right? It's
Mm.
like who you are and what happened to you are two different things, and they're together, they are that, but your trauma isn't who you are. Your trauma is what happened to you. And I think that
Mm.
that line gets so
Mm.
blurry.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm loving it. I'm just gonna riff on that for a while.
Just riff on that, man, because that's a good wisdom word right there that I think a lot of people need to hear. I bet you a lot of people are going to listen to this
Mhm.
and they probably never even thought of the
Mhm.
concept that trauma is
Right.
not what you are. It's not a part of your
Right.
identity. It's something that's just
Mhm.
happened to you.
Right.
I think a lot of people can experience some freedom in hearing that. So
Right.
yeah, share a little bit more about maybe why do people have this like concept that trauma is who they are? Why do they embody it or make it a part of their identity instead of,
Yeah.
how does that happen? I guess
You
is what I'm
you you
asking.
you took the word out of my mouth. It's
Okay.
identity confusion.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just identity confusion. It's identifying so closely to the trauma that you begin to think that that is who you are.
Mm,
And you start to take that on as I am, I am a victim. I am a this. I am. You start to label it when really you're not those things. You are, if I'm using myself as an example, right? I am Danielle Southwick, right? I am not my trauma. My trauma is
mm,
something that happened to me, right? Not by me, not because of me, it happened
mm,
to me. But that is not who I am, right? I am sometimes a wife, right? I am sometimes a daughter. I am sometimes a coworker. I'm sometimes a friend. But that's not like the only thing I am,
mm-hmm,
right? And so um, I think it becomes easy to just say, I'm a victim. I'm a victim, but not do anything. I'm like, you're more than that. Like, yes, you are. Yeah, that's happened to you. Technically, that's the term, but it's more than that. It's not who you are. It's how you are. Okay. Yeah, I have PTSD. It's how I am. You
mm,
know, I like sports. Okay, that's how I am. Right. But that's not who I am.
mm,
So it's, I think, somewhat of an identity crisis that I'm still trying to unravel just a little bit of how to tie those together. But it reminds me of Simon Sinek's. what, how, and why when he talks about business, right? What is it, the what is like your product and services, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's what you do.
Right.
The how is how you do it. That's like marketing. It's
Yep.
how you do it, and the why is like your intrinsic, like what is driving you to do this thing. Like that is, I'm gonna pull this up actually because I'm onto something here.
It's
I
okay.
love you, Ryan, because you make me think, and it's fantastic.
Oh, no, I'm glad. I'm glad. And you make me think too. I've been like reeling this whole time in my head as I'm talking to you. I'm like, oh my goodness, there's so much here in this
Right.
discussion.
So I quoted that wrong. So the why is like purpose, right? It's the
Okay.
reason your organization exists. So
Yep.
when I think about trauma, it's like, well, what happened? Okay, what happened, right? It's an important question. What happened to be
Right.
witnessed to? How is how you react to it, right? How
Mm,
does that affect you
mm.
emotionally? And the why is like, who are you because of it? Like,
Ooh.
how does that
Okay.
influence you, right? And so those things sometimes get a little muddied and a little confused, and people attach the what happened as the who they are instead of just how they are or why they are.
Wow. Wow. In the little time that we have left, I want to, finish these last two. So, the fifth one was attending to one's physical well-being. What role
Sure,
do
yeah,
you
and I
see
think we
that
hit on
playing?
that. I think we hit on that too. Like,
Yeah.
meeting needs. It's meeting needs. Like,
Okay.
do I need water, food, sleep? Do I need to talk to a friend? Do I need oh gosh, I'm gonna have to get this to you afterwards, but there's this really great um the relational center, I think, is when I first saw this. But the Center for Nonviolent Communication, sorry, I was trying to think of that,
No, it's okay.
has this great list of needs, and they associate it to like, what am I feeling and what do I need? And if you can
Mm,
just identify those things, that's half the battle. It's like pausing enough, long enough to say, what do I need? I need a hug. All right. And then asking for that and meeting that need, to someone who's safe, who's not going to judge you or analyze you or criticize you. Like,
yeah.
all right, I just need something. It's not bad to have a need. It makes you human.
Awesome. And you did talk about it earlier, how and even in your own life, you're working with a nutritionist, right? You're attending to
Mm-hmm.
your physical well-being. That's one way for you
Mm-hmm.
to do that. And I've had to work with some grievers before, where some grievers are really dealing with some complex emotional states. And so, in doing the work, I've had to recommend, talk to your primary care physician. If you're having really prolonged times and you're not sleeping and you're not
Mm-hmm.
eating, that's not good for your body. And if you can't
Mm-mm.
attend to your physical well-being, it's harder for you to attend to your emotional well-being. And so there's nothing wrong with going to a doctor and seeing some treatment and receiving some treatment,
Mm-hmm.
taking care of yourself, even if
Right.
it's for a temporary period of time until you can
Yeah.
just kind of get the ball rolling and get back to maybe a new place where you're feeling healthy again. But
Yeah.
I think so many times we're so adverse to wanting to receive medical help because then we think that we're broken or that there's something
Mm-hmm.
wrong with us. And it's like, no,
Right.
you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with
Right.
you. You're a human being. And there's going to be
Mm-hmm.
times in your life where you just need a little extra help.
Yeah.
It's like, I wouldn't judge anybody if they had the cold or the flu and they were like, I need to go get some medicine because I am achy and I have a fever and I have all this stuff and I just want to feel some relief. Okay, well, I'm not going to judge you either if you need to get some sleep medication or if you
Mm-hmm.
need
Yeah.
some medication to maybe make you
Melatonin.
eat better or yeah, exactly. Or you could try, melatonin or something. I'm not going to judge you if you need anti-anxiety or antidepressant medication.
Yeah.
Like there's no reason to judge somebody for those medications that maybe deal with the emotional and mental well-being if we don't judge people for medication for physical well-being.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to throw that out there as
Yeah.
well. And six, embracing a personal moral compass. Okay, this will be good to talk to as we wrap up this conversation. So what does embracing a personal moral compass mean to you, and how do we continue to establish one?
Mm. I think the notes I put down, and I'm just going to read them, is
Yeah.
like, for me, it's like being curious about what you believe and why you believe it. Because there are a lot of things that people teach us, especially at a young age, where we just adapt it and then
Mm,
we never question it and we
mm-hmm.
never decide, is this something that I actually believe and why do I do that? And that's something that a great question is like, that I started to ask myself and then started to teach my clients how to ask is like, who taught me that?
Mm,
Who taught me that? Because
that's good.
sometimes we just live with these belief systems that we feel like, oh yeah, this is what I believe. I believe dandelions are pink all the time. Why? Who taught you that? Oh, but you have to implement curiosity, because if you just attack someone, there's defenses that come, you know what I mean? Like, but you be
Yep.
curious about it, like, oh, that's interesting. Why do you believe that? Have you ever thought about it? Right? Who taught you that? Because usually those are all like, it's not like we're just born and we're like, oh, I believe this and that. It's something that we're taught. um
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, you're right. The professional should never dictate to the client
mhm,
um, these things. It's the professional needs to hold space
mhm,
for the client to cultivate curiosity, because that client may have never given themselves permission
mhm.
to be curious
Right.
and
I
to
think
be
that's
and
something I
yeah.
had to learn. Like, I need to give myself permission to be curious about myself. Like,
Mm,
I need to slow it down enough to be curious about who I am, why did I react that way? Oh, that's interesting. Like, I hate fire alarms. When the fire alarms go off, I like jump. I startle effect, like I freeze, right? There's fight, flight, freeze, I freeze. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Let's talk about that. My body's giving me some signals, like
yeah.
I'm reacting to something. Um, and so being curious is something that I had to give myself permission to do. Like, be curious about myself and why, who taught me that? Where did I learn that? Where do I feel in my body? What is that telling me? And I think that goes back to like your values too. Like, when you're talking about identity, like identity is like why, like the why you are the way you are. It's like your values are closely tied to that. Why am I this way? And you get to decide what that is too, which
Yeah.
is great. You get to decide how, like, what am I going to be? What am I going to believe? Why am I going to believe it?
Wow, that's really good. I want to leave you, Danielle, with the last word. So, do you have any random thoughts that you want to share with the audience? Anything that we might have not been able to touch before we conclude?
Oh my goodness. Let me look through. I think we honestly covered everything, which is great. Oh, I do want to say this.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. This popped out to me too. Resilience does not mean re-silenced. So when you have a
Okay.
traumatic thing happen, you feel like sometimes you can feel like your voice is taken away,
Okay.
right? You're silenced. And for a long time, I was like, is resilience just meaning like, oh, I'm fine, like, and having that power taken away again? But it's not.
Mm.
So resilience is not being re-silenced. It is your superpower.
That is a great way to end the program. Honestly, some really good wisdom there. For you all that are listening, I have as my guest Danielle Southwick. Danielle, thank you so much for sharing all of these incredible thoughts, your perspectives. I think you've really just made this episode just, it's going to help so many people understand their own journeys. And I just really appreciate you taking the time and coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's just like my pleasure. This is awesome. I love connecting with you and just doing the work. Like, you have to do the work.
Yeah.
You got to do the work, but you don't
Yeah.
have to do it alone.
Well, this will definitely not be the last time we collaborate. I'll love to have you back on sometime
Awesome.
soon. But thank you so much for being on. And to the audience, I want to thank you so much for listening and for watching. And just remember, you have one life, make the most of it, and we'll see you next time.